Have you ever just looked at your shopping cart, the one full of soaps and cleaners and all that stuff, and wondered, what's the real story behind all of it? Well, today, we're going to pull back that curtain. We're looking at the household products industry and how it's being graded on a totally new kind of sustainability report card. So let's dive right in. Okay, I know what you're thinking. That's a weird question, right? What on earth could a simple bar of soap have to do with the high-stakes world of finance? Well, it turns out a lot more than you'd think, and it all boils down to risk, resources, and a brand new rulebook for how we think about sustainability.
So here's what we've got on tap. We're going to follow a product's journey from the factory floor right into your home. Then we'll unpack this new rulebook that's really changing the game. We'll zero in on a few critical areas: water, key materials, and palm oil, before we look at the final report card and figure out what it all means.
All right, let's start with something we all get: buying a product. But here's the thing, before that bottle of shampoo or box of detergent ever makes it into your hands, it's already been on this massive global journey. And that journey is a really complex web called a supply chain. You see, companies sell their stuff through this huge network. We're talking everything from giant big box stores and your local grocery all the way to online retailers. And it's that global network where every single step has some kind of environmental impact that we're really going to focus on.
For years, we've all seen products with these vague, eco-friendly or green labels slapped on them. But how do we actually know what that means? The big problem has always been a lack of standardized information. It's been almost impossible for anyone, especially investors, to really compare companies and know who's legit.
And that's where this comes in, the SASB standards. Now, these are now part of the IFRS Foundation, which basically sets the global rules for financial accounting. That's a huge deal. You can think of SASB as creating a common language for sustainability, one that connects environmental issues directly to a company's financial health.
And what's so cool is just how structured this is. This is a super detailed rulebook, not just a list of vague suggestions. It starts by defining the industry. Then it identifies specific topics, like water use. It gives actual metrics to measure performance and technical protocols on exactly how to measure. And finally, it has these things called activity metrics, which are basically ways to adjust the data so you can fairly compare a giant corporation to a much smaller one.
So let's dig into our first big topic: water. Yeah, it's a key ingredient in tons of products, but for a company, it's also a massive source of risk. And why is that? Well, because it's becoming a pretty scarce resource.
This quote from the standard itself really just sums it up perfectly. You've got growing populations and climate change putting this immense pressure on water supplies. For a global company, running out of water isn't some far-off what-if scenario. It's a direct threat to their ability to even operate and stay in business.
And this is a brilliant illustration of how the standard tackles that. It forces companies to report two really important things: the total amount of water they use, and, this is the critical part, the percentage of that water used in places with high baseline water stress. So it's not just about how much water they're using, it's about where they're using it. That's the key. So what even is baseline water stress? Well, it's actually pretty simple. It's the ratio of how much water is being taken out of an area versus how much is naturally available. So if a company has a factory in a region where that ratio is over 40% or even 80%, that's a huge red flag for an investor. It means their entire operation could be shut down by a drought at any time.
Okay, moving on. Let's look at what the products are actually made of. Beyond water, the standard really zooms in on three other major issues for this industry: the chemicals inside the products, the packaging they come in, and the sourcing of one very controversial ingredient. First up, product safety. There's this growing pressure from all sides, regulators, retailers, and us, to remove potentially harmful chemicals from products. The standard helps companies and investors get ahead of the curve by making them track and manage ingredients that are flagged as substances of high concern.
And here we go again, it's all about precision. The standard sets a very specific threshold. If one of these substances of very high concern, as defined by regulators, makes up more than 0.1% of a product's weight, it has to be reported. No more vague safety claims, we're talking hard, verifiable data.
Next up, packaging. We all deal with it every single day. And this quote from the standard gets right to the heart of the business case. Making packaging smarter isn't just good for the planet, it's good for the bottom line. It can help companies win over customers and cut down on material costs. So, how does the standard measure this?
Well, it makes companies report the total weight of all their packaging, and then break down what it's made of, what percentage comes from recycled materials, from renewable sources, or from brand new virgin materials. This gives you a really clear picture of their total packaging footprint.
And that brings us to palm oil. This stuff is an ingredient in everything from lipstick to laundry detergent, but its production is notoriously linked to major issues like deforestation. For the companies that use it, this creates these huge supply chain and reputational risks.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the nuance. The standard doesn't just ask if their palm oil is sustainable or not. No, it requires companies to report their sourcing across 4 different certification levels from the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil. These range from the absolute highest standard, where every drop is traced back to a single source, all the way down to a credit-based system. This level of detail shows investors exactly how serious a company's sourcing strategy really is.
So, we've touched on water, chemicals, packaging, and palm oil. Let's kind of pull it all together now and see what this new report card actually accomplishes. What does all of this really mean?
This slide really just nails the whole shift. We are moving away from those vague marketing slogans to standardized, comparable data that is directly linked to financial risk. It transforms sustainability from, a PR exercise into a core part of business strategy, one that is auditable, meaning it can be officially checked and verified, just like their financial records.
So here's the bottom line. We now have a rulebook that lets investors see which companies are actually managing these critical risks effectively. And that leaves us with one final and I think fascinating question. As investors start using this data to make decisions, how will it ultimately change the products that you and I see on our shelves every single day?